Yo, how's it going, everyone? I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm Amos, and in this video, we're going to be finishing up my One Piece live-action reviews. Now, I was originally doing episodic reviews, but due to some things happening in my personal life, I didn't have time to focus on each episode individually, so I'm just going to skim through the last 5 or so episodes and just give you my overall thoughts on them. I'm going to be primarily focusing on things that really caught my attention, whether it was in a good way or a bad way. I do apologize to those who are watching it episodically. I just don't have the time to keep doing that anymore. I am truly sorry for that. And for those of you tuning in for the first time, if you're interested in knowing what happened in the first 3 episodes, I covered those on the channel already. Feel free to check out those videos if you're interested. And with that, let's get on with it. The first key thing I wanted to mention was after Luffy downed that entire kettle of poison soup, Sham and Butchie found him, and they're like, oh, he drank enough soup to kill a sea beast. He's done for. Usopp ran into the Marines and brought him to the mansion, and Kobe pretty much couldn't do anything, despite Captain Kuro, aka Claudador, being completely suspicious and not allowing them to enter the mansion. Cody couldn't do anything. He's like, I don't have proof. I can't do nothing. And so Usopp ran for his life. Kobe retrieved Luffy, who Kuro claimed was drunk, even though he was clearly in a serious condition. Kobe couldn't say anything because he and him are friends. And there's Helmeppo being a douchebag, completely undermining everything Kobe says. So Kobe had to just accept the fact that Luffy was drunk and took him away. Usopp eventually made his way to Kaya, tried to get her out of the mansion, but Kuro dropped down the protective shutters to prevent anyone from leaving. And then he went from innocent butler mode to psychotic serial killer mode. Like literally dropped the act at midnight, and instead of continuing to slowly poison her to make her seem like she had a natural death, he put on his gloves and he was gonna straight up murder her. Like that wouldn't be suspicious at all. No one would ever think twice about her having random stab wounds and then him just magically inheriting her entire estate. Even though he is the butler, he is not in her will. How would he inherit her estate? See, it's times like this you need Django. If they had not cut out Django, he could have been there to hypnotize Kaya, but I get it. You want a serious storyline. Django is a goofy character. You cut out all the goofy characters. No one was okay with that. At least I hope not. No one better have been okay with freaking Django getting cut out. He was the best character in this arc. Okay, I already went through this tangent. We're not going through it again. And then there was Zoro's entire flashback with Kuina. Now, this was just bad, but I can't complain because I also thought it was bad in the anime and manga. Granted, I did like how Zoro ended up getting Kuina's sword, the Wado Ichimonji. He told his father that they promised to become the greatest swordsman, so he wanted to inherit her sword and will and carry on her legacy. And so Kuina's father was more than okay with that. That made sense compared to him just being like, Sensei, let me have her sword. Huh? Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm too busy grieving to even know what you're saying. Go ahead and take it. And also in this, we see a lot more grief in her father's face, whereas in the anime and manga, it's kind of like a passing thing, like he's sad, but he doesn't want to show it. Which did lead a lot of people to theorize that he killed her, but it's also theorized that she committed suicide. I'm just gonna take it at face value and she just passed away naturally. Or she was killed by a set of evil stairs. There is also that. Okay, then back to Luffy, Helmeppo, and Kobe. So Luffy was, of course, poisoned. He was feeling weak and drowsy, but then suddenly throws up the entire soup and he's better. Not how poison works, but okay. Even in the One Piece universe, I don't think that's how it would work. Granted, One Piece logic doesn't work like real logic, so I will let it slide. Still annoying how he felt better after throwing up despite him being nearly close to death earlier. Or so it was claimed. And eventually, him and Zoro make it to the mansion. Zoro takes on Sham and Butchie, deals with them pretty easily. And Luffy's dealing with Kuro. Captain Kuro of the 1,000 Plans. As he was in the middle of initiating plan number 997, brutally murder Kaya by slashing her to death, then claiming her inheritance. Of course, Luffy put a fork in that plan, but Kuro, being of 1,000 plans, decided to initiate plan number 996, because yes, Kuro counts down his plans backwards from 1,000. Everybody knows that is canon in every single thing, including this one. And plan 996 includes him killing Luffy by death by 1,000 cuts. Kuro, being the brilliant mastermind that he is, and the sadistic bastard on top of it, decided not to simply stab Luffy through the chest with his swords. No. That would have been too easy. Kuro is so fast, Luffy cannot keep up with him. So Kuro decided to torture him by cutting him 1,000 times. And since Kuro has 5 blades on each hand, he can get 10 slashes every run through. So in order to get to 1,000, he just needs to run through Luffy 100 times and connect with all 10 blades. And Luffy will suffer one of the most gruesome executions imaginable. And of course, Kuro, being the speedster that he is, would have been super easy for him. He would have just ran up, cut Luffy, hit, and he simply gets knocked out. Instead of just, without going for the fatal blow like you would expect, he decided to showboat and Luffy knocked him out. Which is like, why, Kuro? You're supposed to be the brilliant mastermind of the East Blue. Why not just stab him? Why'd you just go with some shallow nicks here and there? Enough about that. One thing I did enjoy about this arc, Usopp got a kiss from Kaya. Because we know in the anime and manga, they tease their relationship without coming out and saying it. I'm happy that they actually showed it here. Like, yes, they're in a relationship. And Usopp being just like his father, after kissing Kaya and getting her pregnant with that kiss, he leaves immediately, leaving her alone with a child. Because everyone knows that's how anime characters get kids. It's from kissing and hand-holding. As a matter of fact, they did both right here. So she's double pregnant right now. Anyways, moving on. Kuro somehow escaped the island. Despite all of the Navy soldiers being there, apparently they're like, let's ignore Kuro. Let's ignore the threats that we received about him. He's just gonna leave the island. We're too busy focusing on the Straw Hats. Speaking of focusing on the Straw Hats, Usopp made a flag. And it has his signature long nose from the anime and manga for his own flag. But this Usopp doesn't have a long nose. And the director missed a golden opportunity for that. After seeing this, they all sort of said, yeah, the nose matches. And that's about it. Everything else doesn't seem like it's you. And it could have been a running gag where Usopp was like, I don't have a big nose. And everyone just keeps referencing his nose at all times. Even random strangers be like, is something wrong with your nose? It looks abnormally large. And it would have set the perfect pun up for when they eventually reach Locktown. They could have seen Kaku, who would have had an actual prosthetic long nose like he does in the manga and anime. Luffy could have saw him and been like, huh? Usopp, what are you doing here? Weren't you back on the ship? Or even be like, Usopp, it's your twin brother. And Usopp could have been like, well, why? Why? I don't have that big of a nose. What's going on? My nose is not that big. Missed golden opportunity there. Also, as soon as they left the island, Garp attacked them. And Luffy commented, Grandpa? It's instantly revealed that Vice Admiral Garp is his grandpa. Would have been cool to keep that a secret for a little bit longer, but so be it. They're trying to move the story along. One positive thing about having Garp in this series was we got the cannonball chuck. He just picks up a cannonball, tosses it as hard as he can at the Straw Hats, but Luffy inflates, sending it back. And this is funny. Garp, being a Marine, was mad at first, but being his grandpa was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. You're an amazing fighter. Would have preferred you to be a Marine and not a pirate, but you're still a good kid. Don't think that means I'm gonna let you get away from me. I'm gonna continue chasing you down, and I'm calling a warlord to come after you. But before that happens, they make it to the Baratie, which absolutely looks beautiful. I love this set so much. Having a random restaurant in the middle of the ocean was crazy to think of in One Piece, but the fact that they were able to implement it into a live-action series and have it look this good is absolutely unbelievable. And of course, the food looks amazing too. Sanji is a top-tier chef in the world of One Piece. His food has to be top tier and some of the most delicious food out there. But apparently he's slow, which is like, no. Sanji is not only one of the greatest chefs, he's also one of the fastest. He literally had the capability of cooking an entire meal using another staff's leftover in half the time it took them to make their grand feast. Granted, that isn't canon, but everyone who's watched the G8 arc loves it so much that they technically consider it canon even though it's not. It's just that great of an arc. Hopefully it makes it into the live action when we eventually reach that point, or I should say if we eventually reach that point. And then there's Zeph. He is such an asshole to Sanji throughout this series. I get why. It's because he wants Sanji to leave and pursue his dream of finding the Old Blue instead of rotting in this restaurant. But still, he could have eased up on him a little bit. I get it. Zeph is known for being uptight. That makes sense, but not a total douchebag. He respected Sanji's cooking at the very least. And then we get to the part where Garp finally makes the official request to get Mihawk to go after the Straw Hats. Which, by the way, it starts with Mihawk completely wiping out Dawn Creek's fleet, which absolutely looked fantastic. The fight was absolutely insane. I love how they even showed Mihawk's air blade where he swings his sword, creating an air rip, slicing a ship in half. I thought it was beautifully done. And then there's Dawn Creek, who at this point is practically worthless because we already were introduced to Arlong, but still, it was worth it to see this scene because Krieg asked Mihawk, why are you attacking my crew? And Mihawk was like, you woke me from my nap, which was hilarious, but I kind of wish they did this at the Baratie. It would have been so much nicer to have Krieg flee, Mihawk chase him, and when Krieg asked him, why did you chase us all the way to the East Blue? Mihawk would have been like, you guys woke me from my nap. Did you guys really think I was going to let you live after that? And then we get the typical explanation where someone informs someone else of what something is. That's typical for One Piece. There's always one person who's completely ignorant of something. In this case, it was Kobe, which he wants to be a Marine, but he's not aware of the warlord system. We understand the Straw Hats. A lot of them are ignorant of the world, especially Luffy and Zoro. They don't know much. But even Zoro would have been aware of the warlords because Mihawk, who is his goal, is a member of them. So it's weird that Kobe doesn't know. And what's even worse is the way Helmuppo phrases it. He states it as they were these 7 powerful pirates, as in they were like their own individual group of high-tier pirates, whom the government thought it would be smarter to recruit them instead of fighting against them, which is not entirely accurate. The 7 warlords are 7 powerful pirates whom the world government recruited to fight for them in exchange for amnesty. But the way Helmuppo words it is that they could continue doing piratey things as long as they listen to when the world government calls for them, which no. Once they're warlords, they can't really raid or pillage. They lose their warlord status. They can hunt down other pirates and take what they took for themselves, but not like navy vessels or random civilian ships, unless they're not affiliated with the world government. In that case, I'm assuming the world government would turn a blind eye to it. But still, the warlords were individual people who over time were recruited due to their strength and nature in order for the world government to turn the balance against the 4 emperors. It was a way of establishing balance between the navy and pirates. Now that they have pirates who work under them, it takes away from the pirate side and adds to the navy, but doesn't exactly break that status quo. In the end, they are still pirates and they can turn against the navy, but for the time being, they made powerful allies, instead of being 7 individual groups who were reigning over the ocean. That was all glossed over in the live action. Personally, wasn't a fan of that, but it was nothing too big of an issue. What was an issue was how Mihawk made it to the Baratie. He just happened to show up, overheard Usopp drunkenly talking about Luffy, and he's like, oh, he's the one Garp sent me to go get. And then when Zoro saw him, he challenged him to a duel almost immediately. It was awesome to see Nami trying to talk him out of it, but Luffy in the end being like, hey, it's his dream, I'm not gonna stop him. And then when Mihawk finally came face to face with Luffy, he's like, oh, you're puny, but I like your hat though, which means he instantly recognized that that was Shanks' hat. Of course, Shanks would have mentioned him whenever they had their little get-togethers every now and then, so Mihawk must have been aware of him, he just probably didn't know his name. On the plus side, Mihawk fought Doro with his little cross dagger, which if they had cut out of the anime, I would have lost my shit. This is supposed to be that little reality check for the Straw Hats, because up until this point, they've been going on a win streak. They needed this to establish a hierarchy. The Straw Hats, regardless of how many small pirates they beat, they are small fries. They don't compare to the rest of the world and their elite force of pirates. Now, the fight was cool, but there was one part that just was super disappointing to see, and that was the way Zoro's swords broke after Mihawk had a single slash. They started off at the tip and started falling off one chunk at a time instead of just shattering like it did in the anime and manga, which it didn't make sense. Mihawk had one swing, and that one swing caused the sword to break off into sections? No, that's not how this works. And yet Zoro also came out of it unscratched as well. Although he looked physically exhausted, he didn't have a cut on him, which is like, okay, sure, that's how that works. And then he resounded himself to death because he lost. Once a swordsman loses, he has to accept death, especially since Zoro decided that terms. He challenged Mihawk to a duel to the death. He accepted his fate after he lost, but of course he wasn't going to have a scar on his back, because a scar on the back is a swordsman's shame. We get that famous line. Then Zoro is cut down. We get his oath to never lose again, but it was kind of, I don't know, I wasn't feeling it in the live action. It felt like it came out of nowhere, which is another issue I have. A lot of dialogue seems forced in order to carry on certain events. Like in this situation, Zoro asked Luffy, are you disappointed in me if I don't become the world's greatest swordsman? And Luffy was like, you'll never disappoint me. And then from there, he swore to never lose again until he becomes the world's greatest swordsman, which was like, okay, kind of awkward the way they formatted it, but still, we got the ode. It was cool. It was also cool to see Zeph treat him, because not only did he sew up his wounds, he even put fish skin on there to help increase the healing process, which I don't know if that actually works or not. It may or may not. I'm not gonna judge it because I'm not a doctor. Another cool thing was Zeph's flashback with Sanji and seeing them stranded on the island. Really well formatted, really well thought out, really well designed. It was actually a really good flashback. I was impressed by it, although the dialogue with the All Blue and him following his dream was awkward. Them stranded on that rock was cool enough for me to overlook it. And then the fact that Don Krieg was already killed off by Mihawk means that another villain needs to come and stir up trouble at the Baratie. And who else fits the bill better than Arlong? And now Luffy and Sanji tried to fight them off, but they got their ass kicked. It was a one-sided fight, which is weird because the Straw Hats come back a couple of episodes later and completely and utterly wipe out Arlong's crew. And it's like, what happened? What changed in these few days? Other than the fact that he learned what happened to Nami. But I mean, I know it's a common anime trope, but it would have been awesome to see them kick their ass the first time around. I mean, the East Blue was to show off that the Straw Hats were strong. Mihawk is the reality check. Arlong was the final hurdle before they entered the Grand Line. Smoker was that final wall they had to figure out how to get around because they couldn't beat him because he was the first Logia user introduced in the series. But in this, it shows that Arlong and his crew were much stronger than the Straw Hats. Luffy and Sanji couldn't get a decent blow in, but then suddenly they can after learning about Nami's backstory. Would have been better just to do the Dawn Creek situation, have him invade, Straw Hats beat him up, Mihawk shows up, Zoro challenges him, loses, and then move on with the story. Instead of having the Straw Hats get a sudden surge of power defeating Arlong. It's a common trope in anime that should not have been used in the live action. But the thing that I was happy to see in the live action was Luffy put his hat on Nami's head. Since she was entrusting him with her treasure, her island, her village, her friends and family, he decided to entrust her with his treasure. That's a significant moment in One Piece. There was a couple of disappointing moments with Nami and her sister. I always want to call her Nezuko, but I know it's not Nezuko. It's Nojiko. There we go. Nojiko, not Nezuko. Nojiko. Where Nojiko genuinely believed Nami betrayed her village, which is like, she is her sister. She should have been the only one who figured it out day one. But you know what? Fine, you guys want to build up tension, create some drama, and then have the reveal that Nami was just trying to buy back her village. Cool, okay. But then they try to do the whole Luffy yells out, "Of course I will," after Nami asked him to help. But the fact that he repeated it multiple times made it less valuable and more awkward to see. I would have preferred it to just have been the one time, but you know what, okay. It's incredibly awkward to see, but what's done is done. Moving on, as I said earlier, Straw Hats completely wreck Arlong's crew, somehow magically gaining more power overnight. And then we get the Straw Hats announcing their dreams on top of the barrel. Now, they don't break the barrel in this one, which is I can understand. Probably very difficult for them to get their legs that high up to hit the barrel, but it's good enough. We got their oats. And then, final scene of the series. We get a Smoker teaser. We see him looking at Luffy's wanted poster and burning one of his signature 2 cigars on it. And that's where it ends. Overall, I'd say is a good show, not a good adaptation. Too many things that had to be removed for it to work in live action, causing me to be very disappointed, like Django and Hachi. How do I forget Hachi? The octopus man who was the only member of Arlong's crew who didn't genuinely hate humans. Like, Hachi's entire backstory is relevant to learn about the Fishman history and Arlong's entire mentality. The reason Arlong hates humans so much and Hachi doesn't, but why Hachi is a part of his crew, it was a significant thing, especially for the future story arcs. I can understand live action probably was thinking, oh, we're probably not gonna get that far anyways. It's fine, we don't need it. It will just cause us to have more things that we need to film and we just don't have the time for it. Which is like, okay, fine. But they need to introduce Hachi some way or another if there is a season 2. It can't be, we're gonna wait for season 3 or season 4 to introduce him. No, if there's a season 2, you need to introduce him one way or another. Anyways, overall, I said it was a good story, not a good adaptation. It had some awkward scenes here and there that kind of took away from your immersion. Effects were outstanding. There were a couple ones that were not that good, but overall, it was pleasant. It was pleasant to see, nothing that made me feel sick to my stomach. But in the end, I was happy with it. And to me, that's all that really mattered. Did I enjoy watching it? Yes. Were there flaws? Of course, there's always flaws when it comes to live action adaptations. Ask any Disney movie fan. They all have massive lists of complaints for any live action Disney movie that they were huge fans of the originals. Personally, I say my list compared to theirs is much shorter. Now, whether they are actually going to make a season 2 or not is up in the air. Overall, it did pretty well, but how much money did it make them? If it didn't make enough, it's safe to assume there is not going to be a second season. But seeing how people have reacted to it on like TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, I'm willing to bet that it did pretty well, enough for them to at least give a second season a thought. It may not be greenlit right away, but they're definitely going to take a look at it and consider whether it would be worth doing. And with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and remember to keep having fun. See ya!